Well, good morning, everyone. I'd like to share my perspective with you on climate and sustainability and the issues that we have. And I love the theme of action in the future and looking out for next generations. And from what we imagine our future for children is something happy, prosperous, clean skies, soil, grass, everything is wonderful. Unfortunately, the reality is right now what we're already seeing, the future may not be as happy and prosperous as we would imagine to for our grandchildren and children. And these are actual pictures from the recent events around the globe that we had from tornadoes, fires, devastations. And the common thread between all of these events, unfortunately, is the climate change. And this is something that most of you, if not all of you, pretty aware that is a big contributing factor to these global events. So what's causing global change is pretty obvious to some, maybe not to others, but it's essentially since the Industrial Revolution, we've emitted a lot of CO2 in the atmosphere, which is carbon dioxide. It's a greenhouse gas that traps the heat, and our planet gets warmer. And over the last hundreds of thousands of years, we had never seen or measured these levels of CO2 in the atmosphere that ever been before. And so the problem with that trapped heat is our surface temperatures are rising, and as the surface temperatures are rising, it changes our environment, it changes our atmosphere, and actually our environment it's a very thin layer, it's so delicate, and once we destabilize that environment, it creates a lot of ripple effects. That's why we see changes in weather, but over the long period of time, we see how our climate is changing. And not just the temperature, surface temperature, but affects, it's the oceans, land, it changes the weather patterns and how severe those weather patterns are. So the higher, the further we see the increase, the more severe the events we will have and the number and frequency of those events. Unfortunately, our United States Department of Defense Secretary stated that climate change presents an existential threat for us. And when you hear from people like that, we need to take it seriously. You've heard the speakers, the importance of biodiversity and just even the life in our animals and oceans. It's going to be significantly affected as the temperatures rise because we cannot adjust and adapt to changes that took centuries, millennials, for us to develop and to be where we are. Unfortunately, we keep producing the CO2. We emit a lot of CO2 in the atmosphere, and some industries where we're supposed to decarbonize, have a reduction, we actually see increase in emission. Some of it partly because of the growth. Some of these industries are continue to grow. So as you grow the industry, even if you have some decarbonization initiatives, it's not enough. So the bigger problem with that, you've seen probably some of the Sustainable Development Goals by United Nations. What they do is they provide the overall overarching theme of what can we do to create that better future for our next generations. Unfortunately, with the climate change, all of these implementation of all of these sustainable development goals are going to be harder. When you have more droughts, floodings, hurricanes, it's going to be harder to deliver the resources, food, especially to those regions who need it the most. The bigger challenge of it, the climate change problem and emission problem, is so big and is so segmented that there's no one solution or one industry that we can tackle to say, okay, well, we solved the energy problem, that's it, we're good. No, there's a lot of other contributors that produce CO2 from buildings, agriculture, obviously any type of raw material extraction from the core of the earth. All of these processes, they emit CO2. So regardless of what industry you're in, where you work, you're contributing to the climate change. So this is something for us to be aware of and thinking, well, I work for a SaaS company. we might not have a big impact, but your data centers use energy, and what kind of energies they use, and so on and so on. So every industry, whatever we look, there's different rates, but everyone is contributing to the global sort of accumulation of the CO2. The recent United Nations conference that was mentioned before too on the COP26, they weren't very happy about our decarbonization rates of where we are. There's a lot of pledges, there's some implementations, but what we're seeing right now is not enough. 1.5 degrees increase in surface temperature, they set sort of like the limit before we start seeing a very significant increase in intensity and severity of events. And some of those events will be irreversible for millennia. It takes a really, really long time to stabilize our planet. So with that sad reality, the most recent projections show that we're more likely, based on what we're doing right now, even with the decarbonization, we're more likely to see the increase of 2.5 degrees Celsius. And that's with the pledges, with commitments, with the activities that we're already doing. So if we will do all that, what we promised to do, we'll still more likely to see 2.5. And that's not the best case scenario of what we could do. Unfortunately, the temperatures might rise even further than that. Just think about what it will create in our planet, what kind of societies we will be and we will see when there's a lack of resources, the resources become scarce, when there's the mass migrations, and that can lead to a lot of other consequences, and that's why Department of Defense looking at it as a possible existential threat to our civilization. The other part of the challenge, so in addition to decarbonizing, we still have to remove at least 1 billion ton of CO2. And those projections were before 2025, so more likely than not, we will not do that. The best technologies that we have right now can remove about 40,000 of tons per year. So we are nowhere at scale, and we currently do not have technologies that can bring us to that threshold. So that presents a very big challenges for us. We have to do something that we've never done before, absolutely outside of our comfort zone, just beyond transformations, beyond what we can imagine, in order for us to save and protect the future for our next generations. And not just in grandchildren, these are going to be thousands of years before the planet can get stabilized. We need to have such a massive and dramatic changes that it will involve all industries across all different organizations. And there's good things, a lot of organizations that work on tackling these problems. We need to support these organizations and create more, create new. We need to look inside of our companies and see how can we create value, switching to net zero technologies, switching to and adopting and bringing the value to different net zero implementation projects. Luckily, there's a value in that, there's a demand for it, but we need collective action and we need change. And that change comes within every one of us. I believe that individually we will not be able to bridge that gap, but collectively we can build that bridge and we can unite each other to create that future for our children. And lastly, UN Chief mentioned that we can and we must win this battle for our lives. And I wanted to add, it's not just our lives, it's our next generation. Thank you so much.